It began as an ordinary Saturday in downtown Los Angeles, the kind of day when the plaza would normally hum with the rhythm of city life. The street vendors were setting up their stalls, music spilled from corner speakers, and the air carried the mingled scents of grilled tacos and exhaust fumes. But by mid-afternoon, everything changed. A wave of chaos swept through the plaza, rolling like a dark tide that emptied the space faster than anyone could comprehend. The gangs had come, not with hidden intent, but with brazen confidence. It was as if the city itself had declared an open season and the streets were the prize. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. Word spread that the mayor's new hands-off directive, mockingly dubbed by critics as the "let them loot" plan, had backfired in spectacular fashion. What was meant to be a progressive approach to de-escalation and non-confrontation spiraled into lawlessness. The gangs knew the score. They had read the mood, studied the patterns, and waited for the perfect moment. When they arrived, they came not as scattered individuals, but as a coordinated force, organized and unafraid. Within minutes, Los Angeles Plaza, once a symbol of culture and resilience, was stripped bare. The scene was surreal. Shoppers ran for cover as storefronts were smashed open. The rhythmic chant of alarms mixed with shouts and breaking glass. Cell phones captured the mayhem, but no help came. Police presence was light by design, a reflection of the administration's belief that heavy enforcement only heightened tension. But as the plaza emptied, it became clear that this time, restraint wasn't seen as compassion. It was seen as surrender. At first, bystanders thought it was a flash mob or an isolated protest. Then came the realization that this was something different. The gangs weren't just looting, they were making a statement. Their movements were deliberate, their confidence chilling. They claimed the streets as though reclaiming territory that had always been theirs. The plaza transformed from a civic heart to a hollow shell, a monument to failed policy and fractured trust. The mayor's office had touted the "let them loot" approach as a bold social experiment, an opportunity to prioritize community healing over confrontation. The theory was that by reducing police interference in property crimes, tensions between marginalized communities and law enforcement would ease. But theories crumble in the face of reality, and on that day, reality was ruthless. The gangs didn't see it as a gesture of goodwill, they saw it as a vacuum of authority. And power, once abandoned, never stays unclaimed for long. The sun dipped lower, throwing the plaza into a kind of cinematic gloom. Neon signs flickered in the half-light, reflecting off broken glass scattered across the sidewalks. Shop owners stood helpless, some weeping, others too numb to react. The city's heartbeat, its commerce, its street life, its collective pride, faltered. In the absence of order, fear filled every corner. Even those who had once supported the mayor's policies began to question whether idealism had blinded leadership to the real forces shaping the city's streets. As news outlets began to broadcast the images, a grim narrative took hold. Helicopter footage showed gangs moving in packs through downtown corridors, their silhouettes outlined by the flickering lights of burning trash bins. The images were haunting, not of rage, but of control. This wasn't random violence, it was a demonstration. They moved as if they knew no one would stop them. They knew the police had been told to stand down unless imminent danger to life could be proven, and property, according to the new doctrine, didn't qualify. For years, the relationship between Los Angeles law enforcement and its communities had been strained, marked by distrust and accusations of systemic abuse. Reform advocates had pushed for sweeping change, arguing that over-policing bred resentment and crime alike. The mayor, seeking to redefine leadership through empathy, believed that minimizing police confrontation could rewrite the city's social contract. Yet the gangs interpreted the gesture not as reconciliation, but as an invitation. The delicate balance between justice and order collapsed in an afternoon. By evening, the plaza stood emptied, not just of goods and people, but of meaning. The laughter that once filled its corridors was replaced by the metallic groan of security shutters hanging loose from their hinges. An eerie silence settled over the ruins, punctuated only by the echo of distant sirens. The city had given its word that violence wouldn't meet violence, but now, it seemed, the only sound that mattered was the collective sigh of a metropolis realizing that its experiment in compassion had crossed into negligence. Behind closed doors, city officials scrambled. The mayor, once celebrated for bold reforms, faced growing murmurs of disillusionment even from within her own circle. Advisors debated whether the "let them loot" approach had been misunderstood or simply misapplied. But for those who watched the plaza emptied, the distinction didn't matter. What they saw was abandonment, a government too hesitant to act, too afraid of optics to enforce the basic principles of safety and accountability. The gangs, emboldened by their success, became the new arbiters of the street. Videos circulated showing them distributing stolen goods to local residents, framing themselves as modern-day Robin Hoods. The narrative shifted from criminality to defiance, from theft to supposed justice. For the city's poorest neighborhoods, these images were confusing. Some saw in the looters a reflection of anger long ignored, a kind of rebellion against a system that had failed them for generations. Others saw only destruction, a cycle of chaos that would leave their communities poorer and more vulnerable than before. Local business owners, particularly those from immigrant families who had spent decades building their livelihoods, were among the hardest hit. Many had weathered the pandemic, inflation, and rising crime, only to see their stores gutted in hours. They spoke of betrayal, not by the gangs whose violence was expected, but by a government that had promised protection through understanding. Their insurance claims would take months, if not years, and in the meantime, their dreams lay in ruins on the cracked concrete of the plaza. Journalists began to dig into the roots of the policy, uncovering internal memos suggesting that some city officials had warned of potential escalation, but optimism, it seemed, had overridden caution. The "let them loot" plan had been born out of a conviction that empathy could be weaponized as governance. It aimed to redefine justice by refusing confrontation, but in doing so, it forgot that deterrence itself is a form of protection. Compassion without structure, the events revealed, is not reform. It is exposure. The psychological toll was immense. Residents who once felt pride in their city now spoke in hushed tones about leaving. The plaza, once the gathering place for protests, festivals, and celebrations, now carried an invisible scar. It became a symbol of the city's fragile experiment with idealism, a visual metaphor for what happens when leadership mistakes inaction for peace. The gangs didn't just loot buildings, they looted confidence, and that loss would be harder to restore than any storefront window. Throughout the night, the city lights continued to flicker, each one a reminder of the life that once pulsed through those streets. Social media feeds became a battlefield of interpretation. Some argued that the policy was misrepresented by sensationalist media, that the looting was the work of opportunists, not proof of systemic failure. Others countered that leadership had underestimated how quickly symbolic gestures can become invitations to anarchy. The images of masked figures hauling merchandise through shattered doors made nuance impossible. By the following morning, the plaza resembled a war zone. The air was thick with the acrid smell of smoke and broken dreams. Spray-painted slogans covered the walls, some declaring victory, others mocking the mayor's vision. City workers moved cautiously through the wreckage, sweeping glass into piles as shopkeepers watched in silence. No arrests had been made, and none were expected soon. The gangs had dispersed as quickly as they arrived, leaving behind only devastation and a haunting question. When authority retreats, who steps forward to fill the void? Urban planners and sociologists began to analyze what the event meant for Los Angeles as a living organism. A city, after all, is more than its buildings. It's a network of trust. Once that trust is broken, no amount of reconstruction can easily restore it. The plaza had been emptied physically, but the emptiness extended into the civic soul. People no longer looked at each other the same way. Suspicion lingered in every exchange, a silent acknowledgement that something fundamental had fractured. As the debate deepened, the city became divided not just along political lines, but along lines of faith in governance itself. Some defended the mayor, insisting that true reform always brings chaos before calm. They argued that the gang's actions only proved the necessity of dismantling the old system entirely. Others saw the events as proof that utopian ideals collapse under the weight of human nature. The plaza had become the proving ground for a philosophical war about what justice should look like in a modern city. If you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on the plaza chaos and mayor's plan? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.